In our segment today of Get a Second Opinion, let's talk about a diagnosis that parents and even adults for themselves, parents for their kids, are having to face a lot. And even more of an increase of it is occurring in the recent years. And that's the diagnosis of ADHD or ADD. More and more, we're hearing about this diagnosis, and the question always is, do I give my child or do I myself take ADD or ADHD medication, or medication to control these symptoms? Which is basically what it is. Medication will always be to control the symptoms when we're talking about these mental imbalances. And while that is an awesome question, that is only a question to which you have the answer, because as a parent who has a child diagnosed with this, or as an adult who is being diagnosed with this, it'll be up to you to decide what's best for you. But whether you decide to take medication to help with the symptoms, never ignore the reason why these things are present. Because I can talk a lot about the importance of sugar balance and the nutrients that kids need or adults need as they have this diagnosis. And I can say, well, you have to take care of your blood sugar and there are some nutrients that need to come in the body. And while all of that is true, there is one underlying note that we don't want to ignore when it comes to any type of mental illness. Although right now we're going to focus on ADHD and ADD. And this did not become even as clear to me, did not become so clear to me as when I read a book by a doctor very recently, and he mentioned that he grew up in an era where the Jewish genocide was taking place. So he was born in Budapest, Hungary, and he lived through a time where the Germans were about to invade that country, and it was the only section or area left where the Jews had not been exterminated. And I say that because obviously that didn't happen in its totality. I say quote because they weren't totally exterminated. So he lived in that era, and he says that when he grew up, he heard his mother say that there was a time in his life at 2 months old where he was crying incessantly, and he called the pediatrician and said, I need help. I need you to come over and see my son because he won't stop crying. And this began a couple of days after the Germans had invaded this country where he was living. And understand that the invasion was obviously dedicated to eliminating this particular race as well. And he was Jewish himself. So there was a lot of fear in the air. And this was a Jewish baby. And so the crying is uncontrollable, and the mother calls the pediatrician, and the pediatrician says, definitely, I will go over, but I will let you know, I do want you to know that all my Jewish babies are wailing and crying, and there really is nothing behind it at all. And so, although he never put everything together, as he grew older, he heard his mother say this story and understood later on in life when he studied the brain and became a doctor, that there is a connection between emotional traumas that we have and things we develop later on in life, physically, mentally. And that's one of the most important things when it comes to talking about ADD and ADHD. Yes, we want to talk about habits and how we can change them. We want to talk about how eating better and having a change in lifestyle is important. But we also want to address something even more important and that we cannot ignore, which is what was the emotional trauma that happened and how can I go about healing it? Because when I do, that combined with good nutrition and a change of eating habits and a change of lifestyle obviously is going to take me to a place where I am no longer going to be diagnosed with this or given this label, and I won't have to carry it, which we should never carry anyway. So the idea that as a baby I am very aware of my environment is huge. Understanding that is huge. Because and that's why what I meant when I said I never saw it as clearly as when I read this, and thought, wow, that is amazing. And this is one of the reasons why in other videos of mine you have heard me say, be very careful with what you expose your child to as a newborn. The first few months, do not take him out into the world. Do not take him to concerts. Do not take him to soccer meets. Do not take him to malls. Do not take him to areas where he's going to be exposed, or she, to the type of things that this little body is not ready for. So this gentleman, as a baby, grows up in a very hard era, and obviously as a baby had the emotions. Now as an adult, I can process my emotions. I can understand, well, I'm going through this because, of course, I lost my job. Of course, there is a war. Of course, my life is in danger. As an adult, you can understand that, but as a baby, you can't. However, as an adult or as a baby, I'm going to have a reaction. I'm going to be emotionally responsive to this in some way. And in every single instant, what is the job of our brain? Because understanding the way our brain works will help us understand why these illnesses are present, or why these imbalances are there. They're just given these illness names. So understanding how the brain works, well, how does it work when it comes to this? The biggest and the most important thing the brain will do for you every day is attempt to protect you. However, it can. And in a case like this, where your life feels it's at stake because the emotions are so huge and they can physically affect you as an adult or as a child, your brain has the capacity of helping you disconnect. And these are the children that when they go through these traumas or stress experiences as children, as babies, have learned this protective mechanism, coping mechanism, if you will, of disconnecting from whatever they are exposed to, the stress, the problem, what they perceive in the ambience. They don't know how to process it, but their brain knows that if it doesn't do something to disconnect them, they will be harmed physically. And so it does disconnect them. And these children grow up with this and then become these little kids at school that have that mechanism just activated, and they have a hard time communicating, and they have a hard time focusing, rather, and they have a hard time holding their train of thought in one way, and so they become disruptive in class, and they act out, and they do so because early on in life they learned this and missed something about processing this emotion, and so this protective mechanism continues, and so they're disruptive in class and they interfere with the teacher's teaching, and so then they're labeled and they're given medication, and you put them in a corner and now they're medicated, calm. Thank you very much. As a teacher, I can continue teaching now. Well, that's not what these kids are needing. What they're needing is the nurturing that they missed somehow when they were little. Now, does that mean the parenting was bad? No. In the case of this mother and this child that I was talking about, who later on grew up to be a very successful doctor, in the case of this mother, she was doing the best she could. She was in a place where her life was at stake and her son's life was at stake. So what she chose to do was to protect her child. What did she do? She chose to give this child to a stranger, to someone that wasn't Jewish, to someone that wasn't family, because obviously if they were family, they were Jewish. And the genocide was going to affect the family and anybody that she knew. So she chose to put this child, to protect him, in the hands of what the child perceived as a total stranger. So what does the baby receive at that moment? My mother left me, so now they have issues of abandonment. I'm all alone. I don't know who this person is, so I must not be loved. And so these issues as a child are so overwhelming that the brain protects you. And so now you process them by disconnecting. And you grow up to be a child and an adult who disconnects. And if these are not addressed at some point, you become involved in addictions. And there's so many other things that will be created or a result of this. So, but it wasn't because the parent was not a good parent. The parent was a good parent. The parent was trying to protect the child, but the child didn't know any different. The child didn't know that. You can't understand that as a baby. So why do we talk about all this today? Because in anybody with a diagnosis of ADHD or ADD, there must be a retracing that needs to take place, where you go back and tell yourself, well, what kind of a pregnancy did I have as a mom with this child who is now ADD? Or as an adult, what kind of a pregnancy did my mom have when I was little? Was it a very stressful one? Was she sitting there thinking, do I have this child? Do I not have him? Gosh. Or was she thinking, I have 4 kids. Wow, a 5th one. That's going to be horrible. Horribly stressing. I love my child, but how horribly stressing is that? Or, gosh, I have this productive business. I'm a CEO in this company, and all of a sudden this baby shows up, and it's my only one. I don't have kids, but I wasn't expecting it. I didn't plan it. Or, I'm a single mother. I can't do this. Or, I was married, but now my husband left me, and do I even want to have this child? Or, I'm leaving my country, I'm moving, I lost my home, I lost my job, and now I'm pregnant. Or, and I can go on and on, but I think you get the point. If you can go back to when your pregnancy was and when this took place, or if you can go back to the lifestyle of both parents, mother and father, what lifestyle did they have growing up? Because they can bring this on to a child at conception as well, the stressors, etc. But when a child grows up with these stressors and doesn't know how to react to them and perceives them in the ambiance, it isn't that the parent was not a good parent. It's that the stressors are there. And so if they are never addressed to help the child as he or she grows older, release them, they become these ADD, ADHD children. So the reason we're talking about this now is because we need to understand that no matter what else I choose to do with an ADD diagnosis or ADHD, I also want to address the emotional connotations here. The underlying hidden emotions that were never processed, they need to be addressed. I can do everything else. I can even choose to take medication to help me with the symptom, but I still want to address the emotions. So how do I unlock them and now help this child, or now an adult, if you're an adult battling this, to process these emotions and be in the moment with their emotions? And that's where soul is so amazing, because not only do the products help the mind and the body, but the essential oils that come with it do that as well. So the reason we're talking about this now is because as you go forth and decide what it is you're going to do for this diagnosis, keep in mind the importance of using soul and, more importantly, using essential oils, because essential oils will help you release traumas and emotions that as a baby, you didn't even remember them. You don't even know they were there. You hid and you developed coping mechanisms that today are ADD and ADHD, but tomorrow can be addictions of different kinds. So, and sadly, the medical profession looks at all of these mental issues or mental diagnoses as you have a genetic problem. It's all genetic for you. Someone in your family had this and therefore you have it. Or you have an imbalance in your brain and that's why. And they never consider, Western medicine doesn't consider that this has something to do with emotional traumas, and that if I look at them, now I can proceed to heal way better. So keep that in mind as you move forward with whatever it is you decide, and however it is you decide to address this. Consider that the emotions will lead you down a path that will get progressively worse, and you'll develop addictions, and addictions can lead to other addictions, and so you want to definitely address what's going on. And as you do, these will be released, these emotions. So have someone you love near you that will help you through this. So your husband or your maid, or your parents, or your significant other, or your best friend, or somebody with you, that as you begin to feel these emotions, you can be with them and you can identify them and you can process them correctly. And you can continue to use the oils, because the oils, as my very good friend Jennifer says, will never allow you to lie to yourself. So they'll always allow you to feel the emotion and help put it in a place where you can now get it out of your system and it no longer affects you. And then guess what? You no longer have that diagnosis. So it's a little bit of everything that's going to need to take place, but keep in mind that emotionally you have to be addressed when you're going through this. And as you do that, you'll find that ADD and ADHD is no longer something that labels you, but rather something that you're asking yourself a question. Where did the pain start? And what can I do to address it now? And remember, it has nothing to do with your parents or you as a parent not doing good parenting. Remember that you could have been an awesome parent. I often think of, not that that means I'm an awesome parent, but I often think of my youngest child who is now about to be 24. And he was labeled with, they wanted to label him and give him medication, which I never did, with ADD and ADHD as a child. And I know that the pregnancy with that child of mine was a pregnancy I wanted, but it was a very stressful time in my life. I was going through a huge amount of issues in my marriage, and I thought that if I had something to love, someone to love, and love me back, I would do well. And so this baby, although he was a wanted baby, and notice how parenting could be awesome, but it doesn't stop the child from reacting to his environment. And I wanted to be, and I was in my mind an awesome parent to this child and protected him and everything, but the baby was very aware of what was going on in the house, and he could perceive, which is what I've learned, what emotions were happening between mom and dad. And 10 years later, when I go through the divorce, obviously he lived through that as well. And although I did my most to protect him and be there and all the things that good parents do, that did not stop him from having ADD as a child in school, and ADHD actually, and from actually as an adult battling emotions that would go up and down in his system. So it doesn't have to be with parenting, but if our children are exposed to that kind of environment, stress-wise, and remember, it can be anything, and now more and more it's going to be there, those emotions were hidden. And what we're talking about is, how do I unlock these emotions, get them out, process them, understand them, talk about them, because I wasn't able to as a child. I definitely wasn't able to as a baby, but they shaped my whole life. So how do I talk about them now and get them out in the open? So consider emotions as you move forward with any type of mental illness, because it is not necessarily genetic. And these two diagnoses that we're talking about, it is not genetic, and it is not an imbalance in the brain. We're talking about something that, if you map it back, you'll always be able to point at what emotional trauma was present when this child was growing up, and whether you tried your best or not affected him. So as you move forward, I hope that I know that Soul will help you, and the essential oils will, and diffusing them and using them is very important. So if you're coming across this video and you're needing help or direction in that sense, and you're not connected to Soul in any way, or no one has spoken to you about it, please leave me a message here and I'll recommend an amazing program that will help you with this. And if you've gotten this video from someone, or you are in Soul and you're looking at this video, please talk to your mentor, because they'll be able to guide you as well. And I hope and know that as you move forward, you will be one of those people who unlocks emotions as an adult or as a child. And as an adult, a little pause here to say one more thing. As an adult, you're going to have to parent yourself, because what happens with children is, as parents, I can parent them understanding all this, but as an adult, my parents are gone. They're no longer that over me in my life, right? So as an adult, I'm going to have to make time for myself. I'm going to have to do self-care, which we don't do. We don't have any self-compassion. We don't have any self-care in this society. So we go through life hiding and hiding and hiding more and more emotions, and the coping mechanism of our brain keeps us in this state where these labels are given to us. So if you have this diagnosis as an adult, think of the fact that you have to address it as well, and you have to take care of yourself. You have to self-care. You have to find time for yourself and make the changes, and be in the moment with your emotions. It'll be a little easier as an adult, because as you face these emotions, you'll have friends that you can talk to, and be able to, have friends that you can talk to and talk to them, or use a diary and write it out, or a recording and voice it out, so that you can process the emotions and get them out of you. But remember that self-care is going to be very important for you in this case. So please let me know how I can help if you're not in contact with anybody from Soul. And if you are, or have gotten this from someone who sent it to you, reach out to them or to your mentor in Soul, and they'll definitely be able to help you, so that we can continue to unlock emotions, because emotions make us physically ill, and we need to learn to process them, feel them, because that's what they're meant for, and then heal from them as we release them.